as I made my way through the Wallendor estate, heading up the staircase to the second floor, down the hall, rushing through their fine home, the house painted a beautiful white, the halls decorated with vases filled with roses, beautiful paintings of the family members of the Wallendor family, and finally, the very last door in the hallway, at the very back, a solid white door, and carved into its form a little white rabbit, Alice's room. I knocked on the door, just in case. It would be a waste of time for me to enter at an inappropriate time and have to have a discussion, explaining why I didn't follow proper etiquette. After a few moments, the door opened, and Alice's smiling face greeted me. She opened her eyes in surprise. "Reginald, what are you doing here?" she says. "I had my mother bring me by," I replied. "I was hoping to talk to you." Alice gave me a wide, toothy grin, grabbed my arm and pulled me into the room, closing the door behind us. "So, have you seen the pinstripe man yet?" she asked, beginning to walk further into her room. "It might be a while before he shows back up. He is pretty busy after all," Alice said, starting to kneel down in front of a small cage. Inside the cage, a beautiful little white rabbit. "I think tonight's the night for number 3, she said, smiling. "Number 3? I say, curiously. "What do you mean by that?" Alice opened the cage and picked up the little white rabbit and began to gently pet it. I number my rabbits," she says. "This is number 3. You know, there are foxes all over the land around my property. They always scurry about looking for food. My father says there's a problem with them getting into our food stores. So I decided I might be a little helpful. So, late at night, after everybody's gone to sleep, and I start to see the foxes come out, I take my little white rabbits outside and let them have a play with the foxes. It looked like the last 2 rabbits got away. Poor little foxes, always so hungry. Perhaps the odds aren't fair. Maybe I should break this one's leg. Give the foxes a chance," she said, petting the rabbit gently, smiling. "I really wish you could be here. It's quite entertaining to see them skitter around. I think number 3 has gotten just plump enough." As I sat there, watching Alice pet that little white rabbit, a big cheesy grin on her face, thinking about feeding it to the foxes, my memories of Alice seemed to start taking precedence in my mind. Her smiling while telling me her twisted little stories, laughing while talking about the serial killers in her favorite books, her coming to save me from Beckett Sanderson, a mad smile on her face as she leaned over him, a look of concern when she began to tell me about the man in the pinstripe suit and warned me of the dangers. And all of a sudden, my plan just didn't seem important, or at least not important enough. "Alice," I said, as she calmly stroked her little white rabbit. "Number 3. "Yes," she said, looking up at me with a grin. "You're dangerous. Incredibly so. More than most people have any idea about." Alice began to have a surprised look on her face. "You're completely mental. Next to mad. It's terrifying, actually. Your mental state is that of someone on the edge of being a homicidal maniac. And if that weren't enough, you're also a master manipulator. A liar to the 10th degree. Able to convince anybody of basically anything you want. And beyond being a master manipulator, despite the instability of your personality and the dangers it alone holds, you're far from stupid. You're about as sharp as they come. Your ability to plan and use tactics, it's genius. You have a sixth sense for it almost, knowing exactly what advantages and disadvantages you have at all times. You have no problem doling out suffering whenever it benefits you, or whenever you just feel like it. You, Alice, are far too dangerous." Alice dropped her little white rat, beginning to slowly stand, the expression on her face growing more and more serious as the little white rabbit scattered off to some distant corner of the room. "By all logical measures of business, of basic intelligence, of reason and logic, I shouldn't trust you with anything. I should keep you at arm's length at all times. And even if I do cooperate with you, it should always be with a heavy business tactics in this are clear. I should try to find some sort of leverage, something I can use to force your hand, make sure that you work for me, that you follow my agenda, and do what benefits it. It's just sound business, sound logic. Everything says it. All of the information says you're far too dangerous to be close, that you're far too dangerous to trust, that you're far too dangerous to let run wild. The business is clear. The tactics are clear. The logic is clear. Everything says that I should make this about business, that I should try to leverage everything that I possibly can, manipulate you if it's possible, lie if necessary, so long as I ensure your cooperation, tell you nothing except what I have to. And yet, despite all of that, I'm not going to do any of it because I just don't want to. All logic and reason says that what I'm about to do is a terrible idea. It's counterproductive in every way you could possibly imagine. It's absolute foolishness. But despite all of that, I'm going to do it anyways. I suppose maybe it's just greed. Maybe I'm just greedy. I want more. I look at my father and the way that he's lived his life, all the wealth and power that he's accumulated, and yet I have never once seen him smile. Never once has he ever been joyful. Never once has happiness emerged on his face. Business tells us that we must sacrifice everything in exchange for the power and resources, the influence that we need in order to achieve greatness in business. I absolutely refuse that. What's the point in it? No. Yes, it's clear. I'm just greedy. I want it all. It's not enough to simply be successful in business, to have money and power and influence. What's the point of having those things if it brings you no joy, no satisfaction, if you can't smile, if you can't laugh, as if it doesn't matter who hears you, and for it all to be real? My father, for all his wealth and power, whenever he's home, simply sits in his room stewing. He trusts no one. He believes in no one other than himself. And because of this, he has achieved greatness in business and profit and finance. And yet, there is no joy in it for him. Yes, it is clear I am greedy. I refuse to achieve everything, to gain all the power I want and be miserable in it. I want it all. I want to have the money and the power and the resources, but I also want the other things that this world has to offer. Everything, and that includes friendship, love, people that trust me and that I trust in return, to be able to smile as if the world doesn't matter, to laugh because it doesn't matter who hears it, to be joyful regardless, to know that if I reach over, even in the depths of the deepest darkness, there will be someone there with me, and to know that in the same conditions, if they are lost in the darkness, they may reach out and find me there as well. Yes, it's blind greed, a desire to have everything and sacrifice nothing. Alice, I said, looking at her intensely, what I'm about to tell you, well, effectively, it gives you all the power in the world over me. If you had the mind to do so, you could completely destroy me with it. A few whispers or words to just the right people, and I'd be a dead man. All logic, reason, and business order tells me that this is an incredibly stupid decision, but I'm going to do it anyways. I closed my eyes and focused, reached my hand into my pocket, and grasped the crystal in it. In my mind, I begin to see it, the 3 glowing orbs of light. I focus my thoughts. I need them to be seen. I need them to be visible. I need their glow. And as I began to open my eyes, feeling a warmth in my chest, there they were, 3 ominous, brilliant white glows emanating from my chest. From my pocket, I pulled the crystal and announced Magical Index. And just as before, the book emerged in a silvery flash. Alice looked at me with astonishment. The same night as the garden party, I announced, the Pinstripe Man returned. That night, he took me on a journey to a different place, a faraway place, a strange realm he called the Ring Eternia. There, I challenged the man in the pinstripe suit to a game of life and death. The stakes, everything I possess. A wager made, a gamble on the roll of a die. try, and I won, claiming from the man in the pinstripe suit a magical index, a book of knowledge taken straight from the mind of the pinstripe man himself. All of his vast knowledge about magic recorded into a single book. Not only that, but 3 construct abilities, unrefined powers waiting to be set. If anyone in the magical world finds out that I was able to best him in a game, well, according to his assistant, there are those that would give basically anything in order to rip me apart at the seams for a simple glimmer, a hope that they might find some way to beat him themselves. Basically, anyone else knowing this is a death sentence for me. I stood there as the light from my chest began to dim, looking across the room at Alice, the look of surprise on her face. Slowly,